The asphalt at the Chang International Circuit wasn't just hot, it was predatory. By 10:00 a.m. on the first day of the 2026 preseason test, track temperatures had already climbed past 55 degrees C, turning the circuit into a brutal laboratory of friction and failure. For the riders, it wasn't just about finding the racing line, it was about survival. Michelin had arrived in Thailand with a brand new tire construction, designed to handle the unprecedented torque of the 2026 machines. But as the first bikes roared out of the pits, a staggering reality began to surface. The combination of Buriram's abrasive surface and the extreme thermal load was doing something unexpected to the rubber. Inside the Prima Pramac Yamaha garage, the atmosphere was thick with more than just humidity. All eyes were on Toprak Razgatlıoğlu. The Turkish phenomenon, a man who had redefined physics in world superbikes, was now facing his most harrowing challenge yet. Known for his legendary stop-style braking, Toprak's greatest weapon was suddenly being turned against him. Every time he attempted to transition from his trademark deep braking to the brutal acceleration of the new Yamaha V4, the rear tire didn't just slide, it surrendered. Telemetry showed the bike veering wildly, a mechanical beast refusing to be tamed. But what happened next during a routine afternoon run would leave the entire paddock in a state of shock. No one inside the paddock expected what would unfold next, and it would change everything for him, his team, and the entire season. Behind that calm, focused expression on Toprak's face, the pressure was building at an exponential rate. Moving from the production-based world of superbikes to the prototype pinnacle of MotoGP is a feat few have mastered, but the 2026 shift was different. Yamaha had finally abandoned their storied inline-4 legacy for a 1000cc V4 powerhouse, and Toprak was the chosen spearhead for this new era. Yet as he navigated the long, medium-speed corners of sectors 2 and 3, the brutal acceleration of the V4 was proving to be a double-edged sword. In the past, he could use a controlled slide as a surgical tool. Now, with the sensitive 2026 Michelin tires, that same slide was a recipe for a high-speed disaster. Garage mechanics hovered over screens, watching the slip ratio climb to dangerous levels. The technical data was clear. Toprak wasn't just fighting the other riders on the clock, he was fighting his own muscle memory. The MotoGP package demanded a level of refinement that seemed to contradict his natural aggression. Every millimeter of throttle opening was now a high-stakes gamble. As he returned to the pits, his boots smoking and his face flushed, the paddock whispers began to grow louder. Some wondered if the transition was simply too much, too fast. But the real turning point happened away from the cameras, in a conversation that would redefine the team's entire strategy. Inside the neighboring side of the garage, Jack Miller was watching the chaos with the eyes of a veteran who had seen it all. Known as Thriller for his flair, Miller had become the unlikely anchor for the Yamaha V4 project. While the world focused on Toprak's struggles, Miller and his crew chief were quietly orchestrating a radical departure from standard procedure. In a closed-door meeting, Miller made a decision that sent ripples through the engineering team. They were going to strip back the time attack mentality entirely. Miller's telemetry was alarming. It showed a slip ratio that had almost doubled compared to the previous tests in Sepang. He realized that relying on the standard electronic maps was no longer an option, it was a safety risk. The major decision was to implement a drastic change in weight distribution and a complete overhaul of the traction control mapping in the first 3 gears. It was a move that effectively neutered the bike's raw peak speed, a sacrifice that most riders would find unthinkable during a crucial preseason test. Yet this was only the beginning of a far bigger storm brewing within the technical regulations. The decision to prioritize consistency over raw aggression wasn't just a set-up tweak, it was a psychological war. For a team like Pramac, which had built its reputation on qualifying dominance and explosive sprint speed, Miller's tame approach felt like a step backward. But as the second day progressed, the logic began to manifest on the timing screens. While rivals were setting spectacular purple sectors only to see their tires collapse after 5 laps, Miller's pace remained eerily flat. He was losing a few tenths in the opening sector, but his long-distance simulations were revealing a staggering truth. The 2026 season wouldn't be won by the fastest man, but by the one who could manage the decay. This conservative philosophy was a direct challenge to the win-or-crash mentality that often dominates the paddock. Miller openly explained that maintaining an aggressive style in Buriram's heat would only lead to a high side that could end a season before it started. However, the twist that followed would change the championship narrative entirely, as Michelin's own engineers entered the fray. As the slippage crisis reached a boiling point, Michelin's technical representatives were seen moving between the manufacturer hubs with increased urgency. The paddock whispers suggested that this wasn't just a setup issue. It was a fundamental friction between the new 2026 tire construction and the aggressive aero packages being run by the top teams. The tires had undergone extreme simulations, but the real world of Buriram, with its 55 degrees C asphalt and abrasive grip, was presenting a variable the computers hadn't predicted. The drama intensified when telemetry data from multiple manufacturers suggested the crisis was universal, yet Yamaha's new V4 seemed particularly sensitive. Technical analysts began to theorize that the V4's power delivery was creating a thermal spike that the Michelin rubber simply couldn't dissipate. For Toprak, this was the worst possible news. His entire career had been built on being the late-breaking king, but if the tire couldn't handle the exit, his entry speed was irrelevant. What happened after that left even his closest team members stunned, as Toprak was forced into a total reinvention. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu sat in the back of the garage, shielded from the media, engaged in a marathon discussion with his technical crew. The Superbike king was being told to forget everything he knew about corner exits. The data showed that his transitions were too brutal for the 2026 Michelin package. He was being asked to adopt a more refined approach to trade his explosive style for a surgical, almost robotic precision. It was a clash of identities. For a rider who thrives on the edge of control, being told to tame, his instincts felt like being asked to run a race with one hand tied behind his back. Yet, as he headed out for the final session of the test, something changed. The bike looked different. The wild veering was gone, replaced by a hauntingly smooth line through the technical sectors. He was no longer trying to beat the tire into submission. He was finally listening to what it was telling him. But what the paddock discovered next shocked everyone as the final timesheets were printed. As the sun set over the Chang International Circuit, the final results of the 2026 Buriram test were posted. On the surface, the numbers looked underwhelming for the Yamaha camp. They weren't at the top of the standings. In fact, Jack Miller had finished the test in 16th, over a second off the record-breaking pace of the frontrunners. To the casual observer, it looked like a failure. But inside the paddock, the insiders knew better. The 2026 season has been transformed into a major laboratory where tire management is the only currency that matters. Miller's radical decision to sacrifice raw speed for stability had provided Yamaha with a roadmap that the more aggressive teams were still searching for. The slippage crisis wasn't a roadblock. It was a filter, separating those who could adapt from those who would eventually collapse under the pressure of a full race distance. Yet the true drama is only just beginning, as the official starting lights for the season opener are just weeks away. The Buriram test ended not with a trophy, but with a serious wake-up call for every team on the grid. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu is still in the crucible of adaptation, learning that the MotoGP world is a game of millimeters and compromise. Jack Miller has established himself as the technical conscience of the team, proving that a racing philosophy of control over aggression might be the winning formula for 2026. As the crates are packed and the teams head toward the first race, the tire war remains unresolved. Michelin is under unprecedented scrutiny, and the balance between power and traction has become the most complex art form in motorsports. If the slippage crisis persists, the 2026 season will be a war of attrition, where the champion is not the fastest rider but the one who survives the heat.